being a cinematographer or a director, you have a leadership role, and a lot of times leadership is something we associate with corporate. But I'm starting to realize how that translates into what we do, because making films is a collaborative effort, and you are leading people. When you're a director, you are the CEO of the project. When you're a DOP, whilst you're not the COO, I assume that's the AD, you also have a C-suite position, because you have the camera crew working underneath you. You have almost every other department is interlocked with you in order to achieve this vision of the director. And I think a lot of times when we look at the DOPs we like, we see the final product, we see the final thing, and we appreciate it. These are industry professionals, people who've been doing this for quite a long time. And when you're starting out, you don't really start out with the type of crew and people that they have, but you start with leading. It might be a one-man band, but you have to lead the director in a way where it's not about taking the director's vision and throwing it out, but it's about having an understanding of your department and how you communicate, and that shows leadership and communication. A lot of times as DOPs or as directors, we think of ideas, we know exactly what we want in our minds, we can see it, but articulating that is a whole different thing. Like telling somebody, I want this type of shot. People who have different interpretations of it. Somebody might say, I want a dirty over the shoulder, and you're like, what does that mean? Is it a dirty that we see this person's ear? Is it a dirty that we have a background, or we have another character that's not part of the conversation but we can see them? All those jargons that we tend to use. And I think in the film industry, one thing that they've tried is to standardize the language. But I think as a leader, as somebody who has these positions, it's your job to learn how to communicate efficiently and effectively with your team to create the vision that you have. Because there's nothing more disappointing than going in post and realizing you didn't get what you wanted, and now you have to make the best of whatever you have. And a lot of these things are supposed to be worked on in pre-production, but things happen. I think at any moment you need to be prepared to communicate. The third lesson is you should be open to change and problem solving. I think making a film, I once heard, it's a miracle. Like when a film is made, it's amazing. Like how do they do that? Or think about big budget movies with $300 million. Really think about where that money is spent, who's making those decisions. And when you watch a film and people criticize it and they're like, this is the worst thing they've ever seen, how was that done? And put down to smaller projects and just seeing like what's happening. I remember one time we had to film a scene, and in this scene, it was important for us to have two female characters, and one of the characters didn't show up. And now you're stuck with, do we call it a day and wait for that person to be available? But then how fair is it to the other three people who showed up? And we had an actor who didn't have lines, was a guy, and we ended up having to switch from a female character to a male character in order to get our day done. And you have to be willing to make changes and to think about how that impacts the scene, how that impacts the story in general, and you have to be open to it, because these things happen. Sometimes you want to film in a certain location, you show up on the day, you cannot. Sometimes you want to film outside, it starts to rain. I live in a city where it almost rains almost every day, so you're constantly fighting the battle with the weather. I know that one time, I come from a landlocked country. I didn't know what a tide was, but now I know what a tide is. When the tide came in and we were filming, and you have to run and you have to get out, because as a director, you're constantly thinking about the safety of your crew and your cast, and all these things as they're happening, you have to be quite aware, and you have to be very observational. You have to be making decisions very fast. I think also just knowing that you have a leadership role, it's about respect, but you also have to understand that being in a position of authority comes with what it comes with. Sometimes people are not going to like the way that you lead. People are not going to like the way that you do things. And you have to understand it's not a popularity contest. It's about the vision and the mission of why we are there. I think people would thank you if a great project comes out of the work that you're doing. despite your limitations and things that you have to do. I think that's just something that comes with pure leadership, just knowing you are the leader on set. You want everybody to have a good time. But I think a lot of people don't react well to authority, and you being the director, you being the DOP, you being the AD, you are the authority of the fun place. You are the ones who bring structure to things. You are the ones who have to discipline. You are the ones who have to keep an eye on time, whilst everybody else is having the time of their life. But that is part of it. You have to be prepared that people will not like you. Another thing that I learned as a director is, when you're working with people for a long period of time, a lot of times you're isolated by yourself because people are working and your actors might be friends and leave you out, and you feel like you don't connect with them at the level that they do. But these are people who are trying to get performances out of each other, and your job is just to be there to observe and to guide. So sometimes it's gonna feel like, oh wow, these people don't like me. Sometimes I don't think that's the point. I think that the main thing is realizing that you've created this environment for humans to work, and you're responsible for that, and keeping things in perspective is quite important. Like, let's talk about gear. Does gear matter? Gear matters. The better quality of gear that you have, the easier things are in terms of in post. But gear also can be a hindrance. If you get a camera like a Arri Alexa, you can get the body, but you need a lot of different things. I think that I even heard at some point, and I had to look it up, you have to rent the codecs and stuff like that. And you're like, wait, what? Whereas with cameras like a Sony FX3 and stuff like that was just point and shoot. You don't have to think about certain things. So gear, whilst it can be the best, sometimes the cost is not really worth it. But sometimes, it is worth it, especially if you want to compete at a higher level. Having an Arri, if you can, in as much as possible, level the playing field, go for it, as long as you can afford it. But not being able to afford things nowadays is not really an excuse, because a lot of cameras shoot at these high resolutions, they perform at these great situations. And I know that people will say, yeah, focus on story and things like that. But I think that when you're watching something, the quality that it's in, it does affect you to an extent, And I think the main mindset that you have to have is understanding that I am right here where I am at, and I'm going to do the best that I can, And I think it goes back to my point of, we should stop making films for filmmakers and start making films for audiences, because audiences really don't care, like, on what brand of camera was this made. Is the story fun? Is what I'm watching entertaining? Those are the main things that audiences are looking for. And I think that we all benefit from thinking about things like that. And finally, my final lesson that I've learned is always show up with a vision. And by vision, I mean if you can have shots, similar type of shots, mood, and everything that you want to do on the day. It's beautiful to try to discover things. Like, certain spaces are very difficult to light, but if you show up with an idea of a shot that you're going for, then it's easier to communicate. What I do is I use short deck. I go in there, I have decks upon decks, and I always know, like, okay, if I was to do an interrogation, this is the type of shot that I'm thinking about. If I'm to do this, this is what I'm thinking about. And then you can show your gaffer, you can show your team, and you're all now trying to go towards something that you've visualized. So I'd encourage you to find ways of having this. People use an app called Milanote. I'm old school. I still use Google Slides to make my slides, and just to have those shots that I'm going for. And even just short deck, like through decks, it's where you can be like, okay, I'm trying to get this shot, and you can communicate it with everybody. A bonus tip will be always watch out for the colors. I think color palettes is something we don't speak so much about, but you want to either be using complementary colors or colors that, are opposites, that helps something stand out and not be hidden within the background. I remember one time we were filming and the actor was wearing green, and we were within green leaves, and you're like, oh man, that won't work because we don't really get to see you. So those are some things to think about.